All right. Well, nice to see everyone. Is it actually coming out in the room? I don't think it comes out in the room, or does it?
It should.
Okay, I'm going to be talking about our stakeholder engagement experience this year. And it has been pretty intensive. We visited 5 cities. I'll show you which ones as we proceed here. So MasTech, I think I already showed the slide. Our mission here is really to create this technological and socio-political solutions, develop this network, and also to train change agents. So I'm going to be talking about, first, these regions you all are familiar because you all come from there and you know what the project looks like. Yeah, it doesn't seem like it makes any difference when I do this, does it? It does? That's crazy. I'm sorry. I can't see what's going on because I'm too close to this thing. I gotta put my glasses on, I guess. Thank you. That happens to me all the time. Okay, so here's the outline of my talk. So we'll have team science, adaptive management training. I'll review, and this generally has been graduates and students and faculty participating in the various regions. And then that's generally been followed when we visit a region with a pre-stakeholder meeting, planning meeting that has a regional overview for the traveling team, and those have been great. And then we have the same core team is traveling around, and we do the facilitation and data collection and all the regional meetings. And MasTech already mentioned it's me and MasTech, and Gary and Alicia and Jessica with the help of the regional engagement leaders in the local regions. And so the host urban research team participates in these things. I think sometimes we haven't got quite as much participation for various reasons. I know everybody's busy, but I would encourage you to try to participate in these things in the future because the team building that we've been able to achieve by getting together has been kind of phenomenal, and that's what this project is supposed to really be about. So I encourage you to try to get to these things in the future as much as you can. So now I'm going to switch to talking about training and engagement for a few minutes. This is right out of our proposal, and so mentoring and professional development, provide training experience for graduate students and researchers in leadership, communication and facilitation skills, applicable in particular to large-scale interdisciplinary, collaborative, stakeholder-based research projects. So these are the things we're trying to help people with and present certain means of achieving the outcomes that we're after here. And so these are some pictures from some of the trainings, starting in Miami and then going clockwise. It's Phoenix and Front Range yesterday. Oh, I'm sorry, that would be in MidAtlantic region, and then yesterday here in the Front Range. So what our year one approach and methods have been is it's about adaptive management this year that supports team science skills. This really is a Kanban kind of board, a sign board process where people can see what the work that needs to be done is laid out. We have this brainstorming method, and I think you'll see some variants of that today that we all believe is very powerful. I think people who have been through it appreciate it a great deal. And so this is a way we try to capture input from everybody, even people who generally wouldn't speak up at a meeting like this. And then we try to capture a lot of diverse viewpoints, basically everybody's viewpoints, and get them all aggregated and out in front of everybody. So we have a lot of communication around that seems very useful to me. And then we have workflow methods that support creativity, transparency, and collaboration, and especially highlighting project and task dependencies, which is a big challenge. We need to know, who needs to accomplish what before somebody else can really do some of their work. So it's road mapping. And then finally, we introduce techniques that really are for continuous learning and continuous realignment with the project vision. And this we find to be really useful. So it's a very iterative process, and we think this is kind of an optimal way to run these complicated projects. And so the first year, we've had some successes. We've done, Shirley has helped us do some surveys, and we've done some quantitative analysis of how people are reacting to this training. And I think Shirley will touch on this a little bit more, the particular techniques and so forth that were used. But really, people are agreeing very strongly that they, or agreeing at least, that they have achieved the learning outcomes that we've set. And this, the stuff I'm going to talk about here only covers the 4 regions and 30 unique people, which we thought was pretty good for the first year, since a lot of graduate students hadn't even really come on yet. So, and then Alicia is here, and she's the one who's really provided the training. She's an engineer and a human system dynamics professional person. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Thank you. So here are Alicia's scores, basically on a 1 to 5 scale, and so she's all well into the 4s here for, you know, people saying that they can do the things that we set out to have them accomplish, basically, and that was our goal. And you know, trying to practice what we preach, we have sort of an inspect and adapt approach here for training, so that, you know, if comments appear, then we about content or experience, then we make changes. That try to accommodate those. We try to improve the thing continuously, basically.
This is from surveys, feedback from the
Yeah, a process of surveys and feedbacks, and also the retrospectives that we have right after each meeting. Go ahead, do you want to, Alicia? Okay. And similarly, this comes also from retrospectives and surveys afterwards, and so these are things that people would like to see more of, basically. And the ones in blue we're planning to incorporate in the future. The ones in red will be happening, like, you know, today and right now, basically, and so forth. And one more table of those. So to sum up on team science, adaptive management training, the tasks ahead are really going to be the follow-up surveys. We're working, I think, on a 3-month time scale, and then possibly again later at 6 months, to see how these things might have been adopted by people and how useful it might have been. And those surveys will ask people if they're using it, and what context are they using, or are they experiencing any barriers to actually implementing these things. And then our next big step is to move into year 2 with this, and we're in a position where we have to really sit back and think about the intent and the content and the audience, and basically we hope that we'll see more of you participating next year as we do the cycle. Okay, so now I'm going to transition into talking about the stakeholder proper stuff that we've done, and this comes right out of the SRN call for proposals. And so we're supposed to promote collaboration with resource managers, policymakers, end users, and stakeholders in the private and public sectors, and get them involved directly from the outset, people from federal, state, and local agencies, tribal communities, and various international bodies of industry. And so this was a good challenge for us to get out and do this all in the first year. We really hit the ground running, I'd say, by accomplishing what we have, in my opinion, anyway. And so the goals of our stakeholder engagement process here are to get effective or elicit active contributions to research and outreach, and build social capital, and build interregional connections and capacity for exchange of ideas, creating safe spaces for innovation, where if one area is trying something, then it may make it easier for someone else elsewhere to try it also. And then finally, to support the development of the urban water sustainability blueprint. So we've had this arc of what we intend to do during the 5-year project. And so during year 1, we're building the network and learning about people's concerns, understanding decisions, developing actionable science in year 3, and identifying best management practices in year 4, and finally presenting an updated blueprint, getting it vetted with the stakeholders, and extending the network. And so I want to talk just briefly about stakeholder selection. This was sort of sector-based. We were trying to incorporate people from various sectors of the world out there, like water managers, for example. And maybe even in some cases we had developers and lawyers and so forth. So the host urban area research team was responsible for identifying representative stakeholders in consultation with the core team. We sat down and had a few meetings and reviewed lists of people that we considered inviting. And we ended up with 6 to 8, and actually it might have been a few more in the front range. I don't remember the exact numbers. And then what we did at the end of those meetings is to use those people to help us expand the network even further by having them all suggest additional people to participate. And the idea is they are supposed to reflect some kind of regional diversity. So during year 1, we were building network cohesion, trying to establish clear objectives to foster participation. By this, we were trying to get people engaged by getting enticing them with the notion that they can get some significant benefit out of participating with us in these things, and also in joining these networks across the nation. And so, and finally, to identify the key challenges that they're facing in their urban water management. So, you know, we always talk a little bit about this tension that we have with the fact that to win the project, we had to define a whole series of projects, and so those are pretty well laid out, and in the handout you can read about all 23 projects. But it's complicated because trying to incorporate the stakeholder input after that fact is a little more challenging. So that's going to be one of the key topics that we discuss even right now and throughout the rest of the meeting, see how to make these linkages. So we will try to link the needs of the stakeholders to the project to the extent that we can, and I have another slide to talk more about this, and also to link researchers with stakeholders is one of the ideas that's come up. And this could take several different forms. You know, obviously we want to try to produce some actionable science that our stakeholders can use for their own challenges. And then also it could be a lot looser in terms of a kind of a low-level consultancy where at least you know someone, or we can, you know, UWIN can guide a stakeholder, someone who is an expert on a particular field and someone they can talk to on the phone about certain problems that come up or something. Your name has come up in that context, Jim. So. Okay, so this is sort of the model that we have right now when we talk about this, that you know, we have stakeholder input, and so we can use this in a number of different ways. One way is to enhance current projects, and these are the projects that you are all engaged in, and that's what we'll be focusing on here and today. Or, in some cases, we're able to establish new research projects, and we have a couple examples already. Maz had mentioned the one that Neil Rigg is working on for financing models, and then also Sharon and Liz have a new social, let me see if I get this right, social equity, environmental justice, thank you, project that Mazak already mentioned. And then finally, and then, of course, we can develop new proposals. We're always, you know, looking at that too. And now we have a bigger network. It brings us a lot of power to look for new proposals. And then finally, we went to NSF a few weeks ago. I guess I lost track of how long, but you know, we bring the information back to the agencies, and through our discussions with agency people, Mazak's in close with EPA as well. We talked to NSF, and there are numerous other places where we disseminate the information, basically. And we'll do that on a scientific level, too, as we start to publish our materials. And, in fact, when we published about our stakeholder engagement, that would be a clear place where that information can get out as well. So my kind of perhaps naive model for how we might present this information to you today sort of looked like this. You know, we've talked about matrices a number of times where we'd have the regions across the top and the different issues that those regions were experiencing, and we'd be able to compare and contrast them, you know, which issues are important to which regions and so forth. And then secondarily, another dimension, if you will, of a sort of a three-dimensional matrix, you could consider it, where we link those issues then to particular projects that we already have in UWIN. So this was a really nice, clean idea, but I guess at least my feeling at the moment is that the data are a little bit you know, they're richer than that basically, and they don't really lend themselves to this kind of condensation very readily. At least not in my mind. And you know, Jessica says she's going to work on it more, and I propose that we get together as the team that was actually there and try to focus a little bit more. But you know, maybe there are other things we can do, and so let's proceed here. I'm going to talk briefly about some of the products that are out there. So for each region, there's a sort of a splash page that has some quotes and things, and then we also have like a summary for each region, and not all these are up there yet, but what's important in that region. For instance, in South Florida, coastal flooding is really important. And we have stakeholder pages where all our stakeholders are listed, and there are photos and bios, and these will be expanded as we have new people. So that was Miami, and we have Baltimore here. And then we, perhaps most importantly, we have a synthesis statement, which is Jessica's product primarily, where the concerns and issues and successes and so forth that we gather are kind of summarized in just a page or so of text. So let me get into the specifics of some of these stakeholder findings. I'm going to begin with Southeast Florida. You can see the stakeholder meeting there on the left, and the outside. I've got a lot of great pictures of Gary sitting in nice locations. And Ali was there too. So just as a real high-level overview of what we got from these people, you know, their primary concerns really were about impacts, and here we're talking about sea level rise primarily. And then there were governance issues where there were like jurisdictional problems across the various counties, which may have different regulations, and it makes it more difficult to accomplish their work, basically. And then development, of course, is going crazy down there right now. We have another boom going on. And in terms of successes, there's the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Change Compact that I'm very closely involved with as a liaison between them and the Florida Climate Institute, which is a university consortium. So that's really, I've been a model, I think, for collaboration elsewhere. And then water conservation is you know, very successful there. And finally, they have a lot of good models that have been completed already. They have information needs, though, because you know, there's no good prediction on what the rainfalls are going to look like. It kind of goes either way. And I know we have a number of people here who have been bugging Matt about it, and other people. I know Nasdaq's team also makes these kinds of projections. So we don't have good information yet on the climate down there. And then economics, which is something that came up basically in every region. Everybody's concerned about this, and we have some capacity in our UWIN project, but we'll talk about more, maybe not quite as much as we'd like. So, and the same thing here with the investment strategies and financing models. With the economics, we're interested in tipping points. You know, if we get to some kind of a tipping point where it becomes less viable to live there, or maybe they won't write mortgages or insurance policies. And then late at night, strange things can happen in Miami. This is closed-circuit television of a hoodlum stealing hats in the store here, right? And somebody else was spotted in there too. So, and this guy had already been to the emergency room that night, so it was a lot of fun anyway. Okay, so yes.
So in the Florida setting and looking at climate projections, is the focus really on the big one? Is it correct?
No. Unfortunately, perhaps. It's almost like it's an elephant in the room that we don't really talk about very much. We're more looking at kind of what's the water supply situation going to look like, and how can we increase levels of service for normal types of flooding, which may be expansions of what we have now. But
the sea level rise is tied to normal flooding, the coastal flooding.
Yes, and also the more intense precipitation. I was telling somebody this morning, we had 500% of our normal rainfall in both December and January last year, and it was a crisis, basically.
But in terms of economics, my question is, Florida still self-insures or reinsurance? Isn't the big one the big issue in economics for Florida?
It definitely is. So there are reinsurers that are active in Florida. We do have Citizens Insurance, which is out there and is kind of the insurer of last resort. But there are a lot of other companies operating. I pay to a different company. I pay $16,000 a year for my home insurance, if you can imagine. I know. I'm going to get sick now, but anyway. I hear you. It's very important, but we don't, even in these groups, we bring the reinsurers in to kind of talk about these things, but it's not the key focus a lot of times because it's not as easy to deal with, I guess. Uh-oh. Go ahead. Okay, I think we have a lot to cover. I don't know what time it is exactly, but I apologize. Maybe we'll have a few minutes at the end, but you got something quick?
I was just going to ask, what's the best mechanism for understanding, you put the list of needs in various areas, what's the best mechanism for communicating that to us and us telling you what the best
What an excellent question. Maybe these guys can pass these things out or have you done it already. Okay,
On the tables, there are these handouts, which are basically a list of that responds to your questions, so a list of the stakeholder needs that have been identified in each region. This is condensed. There's more, but we were trying to sort of package it in a way that is digestible for sites.
How much time do I have? Does anyone know?
I don't think they're in the packet.
No, there were just extra
12 minutes?
on the table.
Oh boy. All right, I'm going to forge ahead. Here in the Sun Corridor, climate change, timing, frequency of precipitation. So this is a very similar issue down there. Land development patterns, water demand management, funding for infrastructure that comes up all the time. And then public perceptions are important because people they say, oh my gosh, I'm conserving more and more water. How come my water bill keeps going up? This type of thing, you know. So what are successes down there? They got a lot of municipal support for state agencies, the Governor's Council, watershed management groups. They're good on riparian restoration and ecosystem service-based stormwater management, or more or less green infrastructure, I guess. Nutrient recovery and smart metering is taken over down there. But they're really interested in returns on investment, and they need to convince the public that they're getting good returns on the public's investment. And they have these weird adverse effects of conservation where there's not enough water coming through the taps to flush the bad stuff out the sewers anymore. So this is an interesting problem, right? Something that I hadn't thought of before. In the Mid-Atlantic, some of the primary concerns are aging infrastructure and stream water quality, and especially Chesapeake Bay. It seems to be a real kind of keystone focus down there. And behavioral change is important because it's so much trash, right? People are littering to extreme extents there, and it gets into the bay. There's a lot of informed water management. They've been working on this Chesapeake Bay problems for a long time. There's need for research coordination and relevance. They're interested in returns on investment for best management projects and policy drivers. And then we went out to the Pacific Northwest, where they really know how to live and showed us a good time. So it was a beautiful environment here in this winery. You can't get away from it. They're everywhere out there. You can't get away from it. It's like being in France or something. You know? So interestingly, out there, the big one is the concern, but it's a different big one. It's earthquakes disrupting service to all these people for potentially a long period of time if it's a magnitude 8 or 9 earthquake. So they're trying to kind of move towards more resilience against that kind of event. And then, you know, there's plenty of water from what we gather from Roy and Dave's work and before, but really there's a lot of demand for keeping the water temperature good for fish. So that's a major water demand. And then, you know, just as one example of a huge success, and Alicia was actually involved in this as an engineer too, but they had a massive green infrastructure program that was aimed at reducing the amount of new gray infrastructure that they would have to build. So by putting this in basically all around the urban streets, they were able to reduce the size of some massive pipe by several feet, which saved $60 million in the end. So it was really a significant effect. So, but they're worried about maintenance of green infrastructure. They'd like neighborhoods to adopt it. And also the idea of a bibliography came up, and I think that's something UWIN could readily support. I hope we can. conservation versus rates out there, same thing. What are co-benefit metrics, and then optimal repair versus overhaul progression. And this is something that's come up everywhere too. Like you've got all this infrastructure in place, it's always breaking or it needs to be upgraded, but and the cost of building it all new with new piping systems and so forth would be oftentimes prohibitive, especially if you're spending the money on operations and maintenance, right? So they're kind of interested in us helping them to try to understand how they can implement the warm water type solutions in an appropriate way, an optimal way. And then finally, just yesterday here, the Front Range, water supply under growth and climate change and impact on agricultural lands are probably the principal concern. They've got legacy infrastructure too, which is surprising me since everything seems relatively new, but compared to Baltimore, for example. And then disadvantaged communities. I mean, we've been pushing a little bit more into that aspect of the social equity, environmental justice, and we had it was very interesting. We had a translator here, and we had a Spanish speaker, a monolingual Spanish person, and it worked out very, very well. And she was very made a huge contribution too. So these are things we need to start incorporating more. And then strong utility university ties out here, same precipitation, frequency, intensity, information needs, transition strategies, same problem, and then how to holistically value green infrastructure and decide when, where, and how much to install. And now, with the moments that we have left, it's probably like 5.
No, actually, I have like 20 minutes.
Excellent. Yeah. That's what I want, yeah. I didn't think I'd taken quite that long. I usually go pretty fast on these things. Okay, so in addition to what I just presented of kind of my 40,000-foot view of some of the issues, we've been kind of doing it a bit more systematically and trying to. But as I mentioned before, it hasn't kind of fallen into the neat tables that I thought it might so far. Yeah, please.
So we've been discussing the process.
Yes.
Okay. So what we'd like you to do now is take, if you allow, is take the list of stakeholder research needs and read it over the next 5 minutes and mark on it if the project or a project you're involved with, a UWIN project you're involved with, is in the ballpark of the need. So it doesn't have to be directly on the need, but in the same ballpark. You know what I'm saying? We're looking for people who have some intellectual interest, maybe some related activity, that sort of thing. You'll find, if you don't know your project, I think the easiest thing would be to code it up by writing the project number. And our project numbers are all listed in the middle of this brochure, in the middle of the table. So it's not too much trouble. You can look up your project numbers by looking at that. But if you'd rather just write the name of your project or something, do that too. That's fine. And then we're going to discuss what we find, and then we're going to collect that material. Now remember, these projects were identified by a group of stakeholders where we said after they learned about UWIN and such, and had a lot of discussion about what's going on in the region. We asked them, how do you think UWIN might be able to help in terms of data or research or information? And this is what came out. And so we kind of owe it to them for contributing us to try to figure out a way to respond to that. To the extent we can, and Mike was explaining the tensions there. But nonetheless, we'd like to know where we are in each of these issues and your activities. So, can we take the next? I'll ask the question, and then I'd like to say, let's take 5 minutes and do that, and then we'll discuss it. Yes?
Do you want these to be narrowly focused on what this project's scope is, or our expertise? Because I'm always.
I like that. Why don't we, note if your project's in the ballpark, and then make another note if you have interest, expertise in the area by writing your name. Okay. So there'll be two marks on any item that you see related to. Very nice. Very good.
Why don't you give me about 2 more minutes to go through, just to introduce these. I mean, you can read them yourselves, obviously, but what happened here at the moment is that these are kind of grouped into groupings. So the first ones that you see on the top of the page, the same here, are really economic and financial needs that have been identified in different regions. And then the next one is kind of social and behavioral needs. So they kind of break out, nominally into those sorts of groupings. You'll see that. And then the last thing I wanted to say is that all of this is iterative right now, and we've been looking at different dimensions of trying to put this together. And this is another one where we have listings of issues on the left-hand side and then comparing across the regions in this way. So, we're still working on this, and this is a first cut that you've got in your hands. And you can go ahead and make your input. And then I'll finish up with one last slide after we get to the end here.